Om Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Om Mani Good morning, everyone. You all welcome to the Sunday service today. So today we don't have that much monks here because three of monks they went to the Anaheim temple for the dana, and Kashanti and Shraddha they said they're going to somewhere else for the lunch, and also our Nam said he can come today, so I'm the only one monk here. So anyway, today morning we are going to do the loving kindness meditation few minutes, and after that our other Dhamma speaker is Reverend Kusala. After the meditation he will give the Dhamma talk. So after Dhamma talk you can ask if you have any questions regarding the Dhamma talk, anything, so you can ask. So right now we are going to practice the loving kindness meditation. You all already have a comfortable cushions and the chairs. If you are able, you can close your both eyes and then relax your whole body. Now we are going to practice the loving kindness metta meditation, good girls. Begin with ourselves to others. You can repeat after me silently and mindfully. May I be well and happy, peaceful and free from suffering. May no harm come to me. May no difficulties come to me. May no problems come to me. May I always find fulfillment. May I be patient, courage, understanding, and determination to meet and overcome inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life. May my parents and siblings, may my relatives, may they be well and happy, peaceful and free from suffering. May no harm come to them. May no difficulties come to them. May no problems come to them. May they always find fulfillment. May they be patient, courage, understanding, and determination to meet, overcome inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life. May my neighbors and all friends, may my Dhamma teachers and all the teachers, may they be well and happy, peaceful and free from suffering. May no harm come to them. May no problems come to them. May they always find fulfillment. May there be patience, courage, understanding, and determination to meet and overcome inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life. In this planet and all the planets, all human beings and non-humans, and all the animals, may they be well and happy, peaceful, and free from suffering. May no harm come to them, may no difficulties come to them, may no problems come to them. May they always find fulfillment. May there be patience, courage, understanding, and determination to meet overcome inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life. May all human beings and non-human beings be well and happy. Be well and happy. You can practice this meditation silently until you hear the bell. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you everyone for practice the loving kindness meditation with me. And it's time for the Dhamma talks. I respectfully invite to the Reverend Kusala to do his Dhamma talk.
Happy Easter 2026. I'm going to talk about Hanamatsuri today, but before I go there, I'm going to talk about a unique difference between Christianity and Buddhism when it comes to Easter and the Buddha's parinirvana. What we're celebrating today for Christians is the resurrection of Jesus, who died on Friday, being nailed to a cross. And he was resurrected and reborn into heaven. And when the Buddha died, he said, "This is my last lifetime. I'll never be reborn again. Do you have any questions?" Nobody had any questions until after he died. And then everybody figured out that he would have said this or he would have said that. I thought it was fascinating. But the idea in Buddhism is, as the Buddha said at one time, he says, "I do not teach the path to everlasting life. I teach the path of how not to be reborn again. Because every time we're reborn, we suffer." Now, Buddhism has a wonderful heaven, which might be a lot like Christian heaven. I don't know. But the problem with Buddhist heaven is that it's temporary. And then you have to leave. And you're really disappointed because it's just the way you want things to be. And then you go down and there's a second heaven and there's the human realm and there's the animal realm and there's the hungry ghost realm and there's all these different places to go. And eventually when you achieve your enlightenment, you achieve your nirvana, then you end up in parinirvana, which is not heaven. The Buddha never really defined what parinirvana is, and I haven't got a clue. But he did say it's ultimate peace and there's no suffering. And that sounds like a pretty good place to end up after years and years of practice and lifetimes of misery and suffering. So, Hanamatsuri, the topic for today. This started out about 700 years ago in Japan when they went from the lunar calendar to the Gregorian calendar. And one of the interesting things about that transition was now we can celebrate the life of the Buddha 3 times in 1 year. We can celebrate it in May, full moon day of May. The southern schools, the Theravada schools, that's when they celebrate the birth of the Buddha, the life of the Buddha, and the death of the Buddha. Because of the Gregorian calendar in northern Buddhist schools, Mahayana, they celebrate Bodhi Day in December. Bodhi Day is when the Buddha became enlightened. So we have Bodhi Day and the Christians have Christmas. And then April 8th is when we celebrate Hanamatsuri. And this year we have Easter happening today. So we have some interesting challenges. You know, do I go to church? Do I go to the meditation center? Do I go to both? Do I go to neither? But Hanamatsuri celebrates spring. It's the flower festival. And we used to celebrate it here every year. Now we celebrate it occasionally. But it was a fun time, and I'll explain exactly how that works. And for some reason, within the flower festival and the spring festival, they added the Buddha's birth. And I spoke yesterday at Leisure World, a retirement community, about the Buddha's birth, and I got some resistance. They said, how can you believe a story like that? And you'll soon hear the story. And the idea is you don't need to believe it. It's just a story. It's a rather unique story. And so the fellow who really didn't like the story said, well, why do you have that in there? You know, I practice Buddhism because I want to end my suffering, and I have my meditation practice, and I practice the 5 precepts, and this is like the real stuff. And what you're talking about with the birth story is not real, and does it help you end your suffering? It's a religious story. There are many ways to look at Buddhism. Buddhism can be a religion. Buddhism can be a therapy. Buddhism can be a lifestyle. Buddhism can just be another way of thinking about stuff. Buddhism can be applied in many different ways in our life. And this is one of the ways that religious Buddhists understand the beginning of our Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and why they're practicing Buddhism. Now, 2,500 years ago, even more, in the Buddhist countries, you know, not everybody was literate. And they didn't have a lot of, mostly oral tradition based on stories. And so with all the stories they got to hear, it was hard to remember a lot of them. So they made the stories bigger and more unbelievable, just like some of the TV shows and movies that we watch today, and we don't forget them. And they stimulate us, and we have emotional reactions to them. We have intellectual reactions to them. So my teacher, Dr. Ratnasara, at one point, I asked him the same question. I said, why did they have these dumb stories in Buddhism? What good does it do? And he said, well, think of it this way, Kusala. He was a very kind man. Think of it this way, Kusala. Think of it as a tree, and the tree has bark, and then the tree has the core. The stories are the bark, and the stories protect the core philosophy of Buddhism. If we simply stated the philosophy of Buddhism, it would have died out thousands of years ago, or maybe hundreds of years ago. You know, most people don't come to Buddhism for the philosophy. Most people come to Buddhism because they're suffering. They think it might be helpful. There's a lot of different reasons people are attracted to Buddhism. And so we have the bark, the core, and we have the stories, and then we have the practice and philosophy. So this is part of the bark. This is the story part. The Buddha. The Buddha's mother was Queen Maya. And one night, she had a dream. She dreamt of a white elephant with 6 tusks. And the white elephant went into her right side and disappeared. And she became pregnant. Lo and behold. And then, after 9 months, it was time to give birth. And she was on the way to her parents' house because they didn't have hospitals back then. And she was going to have her baby, and she stopped in a sala grove, and the baby didn't wait to get to the parents' house. The baby was born in the sala grove. And the baby was Siddhartha, and the baby came out of the right side where the elephant had gone in. And when it came out, it stood up and took 7 steps. And under each step, a lotus flower blossomed. And it pointed to the sky and pointed to the ground. And I have come. And that's sort of how it started. Now, do we need to believe that? Is it a metaphor? It can be anything you want it to be. I looked at it as a rather interesting story. With Jesus, we had Immaculate Conception, we had 3 wise men, and we had the manger, and we had all that kind of stuff. How true is all of that? One never knows, but it also means something more than the story. So now we have Siddhartha, and Siddhartha was a prince, had a great life, protected from all the miseries of life as best his father, the king, could do. And one day went into the streets of the city with his charioteer Chana and saw 3 things that forever changed his life. The first thing he saw was this really old person, probably close to my age. And he was bent over and had wrinkles and moving sort of slow. And Siddhartha looked at that and said, Chana, what's wrong with him? What kind of sickness does he have? Oh no, he's not sick. He's just old. And everybody that lives long enough gets old. Siddhartha hadn't thought about that because he was surrounded by young and beautiful people all the time. And then they continued to the streets of the city. And then they saw this really sick person. And Siddhartha looked at the really sick person and said, how old is he? Why is he like that? And Chana said, no, he's not old, he's sick. And everybody that lives long enough gets sick, which is why we have Medicare and Medicaid. Okay, so now they continue to the streets of the city, and now they see this dead guy. And Chana said, wow, that guy is really sick. What does he have? And Chana said, no, he's not sick, he's dead. And everybody that's born has to die. Well, this just freaked Siddhartha out. He had never seen the sights. And can you imagine all in one day and having that just blast into your consciousness? How do you reconcile that? How do you make sense of all that? So now they're on the way back to the palace. And Siddhartha says, wait, stop here. Because I see in the distance this person who seems calm and collected and unaffected by all the suffering I've just seen. Why is he like that? And Chana said, well, he's a mendicant. He's dressed in white. His practice is to make sense of his own life and find out what it all means. And I think at that moment it really planted a seed in the Buddha's mind that would be his option, that he was going to be a mendicant. He was going to find the answer to suffering, why we suffer and how to end the suffering. Now they had some wise men back then as well, and the wise men came to the palace and looked at Siddhartha, and the king said, well, what do you think? What do you think his future is? And to a person, each one said, well, he'll either be one of 2 things. He'll be a world ruler, or he'll be a religious person. One of the 2. We can't tell you which one. So the king was hoping he would be a world ruler and take over the kingly business. But as we know, he went out at the age of 35, he went out into the forests and jungles of India and decided, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. And he did. He found the answer to suffering, and he taught for 45 years, died at the age of 80. And so Hanamatsuri celebrates his birth. And how we used to do it here is we have this like little form with a roof on it and 4 legs. And then we have a bowl, and then we have a little baby Buddha statue pointing up to the sky and down to the earth. And we fill the little bowl with tea, and we have a ladle. The ladle is to take the tea and pour it over the Buddha statue. And so we would line up here, and one at a time we'd come on the tatami mats, and we kneel before the little Buddha statue and take the ladle, and we take the tea, and we pour the tea over the Buddha statue 3 times. And the first time we would say, with this tea, I will purify my greed and work on generating generosity. The second time, the ladle over the baby Buddha. With this tea, I will purify my hatred and anger and have love and kindness. The third time, with this tea, I'll take the ladle, pour it over the baby Buddha. I will purify my ignorance and work on wisdom and insight. And then we would bow to the little baby statue and go away. Now they say when the Buddha was born, tea fell from the heavens. A sweet tea fell from the heavens. So this whole thing we do is to represent what happened when the baby Buddha was born and how we can use it to purify our greed, hatred, and delusion, our unskillful mindset. And for me, that was the most important part. It wasn't the story, it wasn't the rituals so much as applying the ritual to ourselves and changing our life in a positive, wholesome way. And today, as you look at the world, we could use that every day. Every person could be doing something like that every day and making this world a little better by making themselves a little better. So that is Hana Matsuri. And it's this year, it was going to be April 8th. So if you go online and you can, look up Hana Matsuri and they will tell you everything you need to know and more, along with pictures of a bunch of flowers all over the place. And as I look at our little backyard with our flowers, they're all blooming. Spring is here. It's a wonderful time of year unless you have hay fever. And then not so much. But it's like, so that's what I wanted to share with you today. And does anybody have any questions or comments on what I've said or the story of the baby Buddha? How did you feel about that? Do you think it would make a good movie? John, what do you think? Sure. Yeah, I think so. You could do it in sort of an animated feature. And that kind of stuff. Okay. So have you heard that story before? Hana Matsuri, the birth of the Buddha? Yeah. Okay. And when you first heard it, how did you feel?
To me, it felt, I was trying to understand what the metaphor was because it felt hard for me to, I like the lessons that he learned as a kid.
Yeah.
But the supernatural stuff went above my head. So I was trying to figure out what it meant.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean anything. It's just a story. But we always want to give meaning to it. And because we're from the West, and because we have this intellectual capacity to understand a whole bunch of stuff, we try to apply the intellect to that story and realize it doesn't work. But if you apply the heart to that story, it does work. If you intuit the meaning of that story, it does work. But that takes a long time to get there, because our first response is, what does it mean? What page of the book is that on so I can read it again? Is there a commentary that will make sense so I can rest easy with it? Or if you've meditated long enough and understand Buddhism well enough, you could just simply live in the mystery. And that's the best place to live. Because this whole thing is a mystery when you break it down. Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you.
Okay.
It seems like it's trying to deify the Buddha.
Yes.
Later devotees
Yes.
trying to elevate him one way or another.
Absolutely. That's the religious aspect.
Yeah.
And the thing that attracts, I think, Westerners to Buddhism is not the deified Buddha, but the Buddha as a man. He's a regular guy, had some special attributes, but pretty much just a regular guy who through his own effort and insight achieved complete freedom and release from suffering. And when we look at that, we realize we don't have to be a god, small g, to do what the Buddha did, because the Buddha wasn't a god, small g. The Buddha was a man. Now you might say, well, how about women? What about all those women out there? 50%. of the population turns out to be women. Well, the Buddha, at one point, his stepmother, you see, the story goes the king married sisters, two sisters. And one was Queen Maya, and Queen Maya died after the birth of the Buddha. And then her sister took over being the stepmother. Okay. So the sister, performed her duties well and raised the Buddha, and he became a wonderful person. And then when the Buddha left to find the answer to suffering, the stepmother no longer had a king either because he had died. And she wanted to go to the Buddha and say, can you ordain me? I want to be a nun. Okay, now, at that time, there weren't any nuns. The Buddha said, my teachings are too important to ordain a woman because there were no women that were ordained at that time. So he was a little skeptical about doing that. And so he went and was giving a talk in one of the little villages, and the stepmother came up and said, can you ordain me? And no, I'm sorry, I can't. And then he went to the next village, and she went to the next village, and why can't you ordain me? Because there are no women that are ordained. And then he went to the next village, but now she got smart. She went to Ananda, his right-hand monk, and said, Ananda, can you help me? I want to be ordained. Without a man in my life, I can't have a life. Now, this is 2,600 years ago, so it's a little bit, women, I guess, were more dependent on men back then than they are today. Ananda said, yes, I can help you. So at the next village, she didn't go, but Ananda went. And Ananda said to the Buddha, your stepmother wants to be ordained. Why can't you ordain her? Look what she did for you when you couldn't do it for yourself. And then the Buddha reiterated the story. Well, there are no women that are ordained, and my teachings are too important, and da. Now, Ananda had the big question. Ananda said, can a woman achieve nirvana? And the Buddha said, yes, of course. And then Ananda said, well, why can't she be a nun? The Buddha said, okay, we'll ordain her. So the stepmother became the first nun. And then after that, we have a variety of women who were being ordained. And there's a book out that's been out for a very long time, since the time of the Buddha, basically, called the Therigatha. And these are stories from the original nuns on how they got ordained and what they did with their ordination and how they lived their lives. And it's fascinating. And you can find free copies on the internet called the Therigatha in PDF. And it's just a real eye-opener to how different life was back then and how women were treated back then as well. Even if they were ordained and even if they were wearing robes, the general population didn't understand what all that was. So I always found that story interesting because, if you talk to a Catholic about having a woman priest, so far not so good. They don't ordain women yet. I think that'll change.
The Episcopalians were like that too until fairly recently. They started ordaining women.
Yeah. But I think with the new Pope, because he comes from Chicago, there may be a chance to have some women priests in there too. Questions? Steve?
Well, I'm thinking about Karuna's experience here, and she being about the only nun to ordain women in America, at least very few, and they had a grand ordination here, I think, 10, 15 years ago. And so it seems to be a problem still in Buddhism, where women are treated like second-class monks too.
Steve, you're mumbling, and I can't hear very well anymore because I'm an old guy.
I was talking
So if you
about
could speak more distinctly.
what Karuna went through.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Well, we had a few ordinations here of women. And women would come from all over the world. They'd fly in to get ordained, because sometimes in their country they couldn't get ordained. If they were Tibetan nuns, you can't be a Tibetan nun that's fully ordained. They're novice nuns. And so the novice nuns would come here to our ceremony and they'd get full ordination. One of the things that is sad, but very human, is that oftentimes the monks are celebrated and supported, and the nuns are sort of put up with. They don't have the same access to living quarters or monasteries or food, or there's this double standard still. So it's going to take a while, I think, for everybody to be equal. And given enough time, I think that will happen. And I think it will happen in the West. That'll be our, legacy. That, go to the West and become ordained and give up everything you love and cherish.
Are there other temples in America that ordain women?
There are, yeah.
Just like a handful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many.
There's even a Theravada temple down the street, Dharma Vijaya Buddhist Vihar. They've ordained women, So it's yeah. So that's a good sign. That means we're making progress, and of course the whole idea is that eventually we have to give up our ordination, because the ordination doesn't get us enlightened. So there comes a point when we just sort of like walk away from it, and with our enlightenment, and just do what enlightened people do, which is chop wood and carry water, according to the Zen tradition. So, okay, yeah. Question? Answer?
No, I think the concept of the bark on the tree
Yeah.
really resonates. Right?
Good.
Because I think that you need something to keep people engaged. It's the flavor there. It's interesting, right? And when I think about the birth story, when you talk about being comfortable in the mystery, the interesting thing is hearing the story activates the thinking mind.
Of course.
We have to know. Did it happen? What did that look like? How did that happen? Boom.
Exactly.
And it's almost this test of not thinking.
Yeah.
Do you need to understand?
Yeah.
I don't know. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a huge question too?
Yeah.
Would Jesus have been considered a deva in
Um,
our tradition?
yeah, some people think so. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a book, Living Buddha, Living Jesus, and sort of compared them. And there really isn't much of a comparison. They're both really good. They both did some really good stuff. And they were both killed, actually. The Buddha died because of food poisoning. But it wasn't intentional, but the results were still the same. And of course, we know how Jesus ended up. And then you just go, wow, it seems like the good people are taken off the earth a lot faster than the jerks and the bad people. And you sort of wonder what that is, and that could just be the lesson, And so the older I get, the more I realize that maybe I'm not there yet, and I need a couple more years to go.
Chop wood, carry water.
There you go, chop wood, carry water, yeah.
If Buddha and Jesus had met, what would you speculate they would talk about?
Nothing, because they spoke different languages.
That's a great answer.
So, good question. Thank you. I don't know what they talk about, because one was divinity, and one was, basically just a man, who focused on suffering. And I don't know if the Buddha or Jesus just focused on suffering. I'm sure he talked about it. And, he made, he got food and made water into wine or whatever he did, that kind of stuff. He made a blind man see and a deaf man hear. He did a lot of good stuff. but it's just like, I don't, there was such a big cultural difference, from the Middle East, to, down in India and Nepal, where the Buddha sort of hung out. And the Buddha never went any further than 300 miles from his birthplace, because he was walking all the time, didn't have transportation. So, as people speculate, well, I wonder if the Buddha ever met a Christian, and probably not. Hindus, basically, or what the Hinduism was at that time, Brahmanism, things like that. It would have been interesting for them to come together, and it would have been interesting to hear their conversation. But I don't know if that's as important as we would like it to be. I don't think that would change anything, really. I don't think it would change the Christ. I don't think it would change the Buddha. They'd still be talking what they're talking, and have different goals. One was faith, and one was be an island unto yourself at the end. And that's such a radical difference when it comes to dying. My friend Anna came by a couple days ago with some cat food. And she's going back to school. She's in her 50s now. And she's going back to school, and she wants to be a therapist. And she wants to help people die. She wants to work in hospice. And she's just fascinated by death. And it is an interesting subject, and there's plenty of people talking about it. And I mentioned to her about having a good death and a bad death. And maybe she could help people have a good death. And she had never thought about that. She never looked at death as being good, or being a good way to do it, And so hopefully she will, spend the 6 years in doing her stuff, and then she will, be able to help people die well. Okay.
When people come into a temple like this and they see the Buddha there, they think of it as a subject of worship instead of a subject of veneration. And I try to explain to people, it's like he's sitting there in meditation with you. He's just a person.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said was applied to real people living a real life, and what their choices are, and how to make good choices, not bad ones. You have to explain that to people over yourself?
No, what I found was, Steve, that when after a few years of meditation, when I looked at the Buddha image behind me, I looked at it as a mirror, reflecting my potential. I didn't see it as a deity. And then to go a little bit further, I saw it as fiberglass, and not worth very much at all. Because sometimes you walk into a temple and it's gold, huge, heavy and worth a lot of money. Ours is fiberglass. This came from Taiwan. It was a gift to Thich Thich Nhat Hanh. And I like it. And one person can pick it up, move it, dust, and then put it back. But I think it's a mirror. I think when we look at Kuan Yin statue, it's a mirror too. It's reflecting our potential, compassion, wisdom,
Equanimity.
And equanimity, ultimately, yeah, peace, ultimate peace, yeah. So I usually don't share that with people right away, because people like to, if they're religious, they like the idea of a deity. And this is a great statue. I mean, it just fits all the characteristics of a deity. But I looked at it in a more practical way. And have I seen my own reflection yet? No, not yet. I just see his reflection.
Hopefully your rebirth will be a kind one.
Maybe one day. And then I'm going to go on the internet and say, hey, I'm enlightened. And I'll have all these people deleting me from their Facebook page. So it'll be interesting. So, but after a while, it's just like you don't even think about that as the goal. After a while, the goal is just, you get up, you do a little meditation, you get a cup of coffee, you have your day, and then the next day you get up, do a little meditation, you have some coffee, do your day, and it's just that's what you do. It's just you meditate, and it's the journey. Ultimately, it's not the destination. But it's hard to get the destination out because we're all so goal oriented. The goal becomes I want to be enlightened. And you'll do everything you can to be enlightened. And some of the stuff you're doing is preventing you from being enlightened. Like the desire to be enlightened. How do you get rid of that? So that's when you just have meditation, have a cup of coffee, and continue your day. Yeah. And, perfect timing. It's about 5 minutes to the magical hour of 12 o'clock, which is the end of service. So at this point, I'm going to shut up and
Thank you, Kusala, for your Dhamma talk. And now it's time to read the page number 4 and page number 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are
inexhaustible.
I vow to end them all. Dharma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and the sick find health relief. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Thank you very much for everyone for being with us today. Even though today is the Easter Sunday, so you all are here to practice the meditation and for the Dhamma talk. So thank you for everyone. And also we have some announcements. So Reverend Shanti, abbot of the IBMC, he wanted to tell you next month, May first week, first Sunday, we celebrate as Reverend Kusala mentioned, Buddha's birthday. So May first Sunday, we are going to do the dana for maybe 10-11 monks, and also we have food for the lay people also. So on that day, we have right now we have 4 members to observe the 5 precepts. So if someone willing to observe the 5 precepts, you all are welcome on that day. But before that, at least you have to practice 5 precepts. At least you are able to read it 5 precepts in Pali, right? So Others are they are still now they are practicing how to pronounce it, how to say Panatipata, Veramani, Sikkapadam, Samadhyami in Pali language. So if someone willing to observe that one, they have to practice that. That's and also next Sunday, our Dhamma speaker is Sayar Maharjan. So you all are welcome to the next Sunday also. So you can hear a nice Dhamma talk next Sunday also. And next Sunday we have 10 to 10:45 morning meditation, and after that 11 to 12 as today we have the service. So thank you very much for everyone listening and being kindness with us today. And I think I need some time to make the cookies for you. So I'm the only one here today. So I wish you all be well and happy and peaceful. And by the power of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and you all have done the good deeds and merits in your whole life, I wish you all, by the power of that all things, to fulfill bliss of supreme liberation, Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.